Und da sind wir wieder live unterwegs in unserem Zug in Richtung Czernowitz. Ich freue mich, dass ihr wieder zugestiegen seid. Ihr seht, hatten kleine Startschwierigkeiten heute Morgen bei unserer digitalen Reise. Der Zug kam nicht so richtig in die Gänge. Aber wir sind in Rumänien, in Nordrumänien noch immer, sind unterwegs mit dem historischen Zug auf den Gleisen von 1913, sind schon in Ungarn gestartet, nun gestern in Oberwischau, nee, vorgestern waren wir in Oberwischau. Nun fährt der Zug ein Stückchen wieder zurück nach Sighet, wir haben gestern schon drüber gesprochen, und in Sighet, das ist sozusagen die Grenzregion zur Ukraine, und früher ging es sozusagen ab Sighet dann rüber direkt in die Ukraine, aber wir machen noch einmal Station in Sighet, einem Ort, wo schon zu KOK-Zeiten in der Donaumonarchie ein Gefängnis gebaut wurde, und dieses Gefängnis hat eine fürchterliche Geschichte genommen. Es ist einer der Täterorte gewesen von den Verbrechen in der kommunistischen Zeit, und heute ist dort eine Gedenkstätte installiert, die an den Widerstand in der kommunistischen Zeit, aber auch an die dort inhaftierten Menschen erinnert. Und wir haben jetzt eingeladen einen Vertreter dieses Memorial Sighet. Ich werde jetzt gleich zu ihm rüberschalten, und ich werde gleichzeitig ins Englische überwechseln. Wir werden also auf Englisch sprechen, wenn Interesse besteht, dass wir dieses Gespräch auch hinterher auf Deutsch nochmal untertiteln sollen. Bitte schreibt es in die Kommentare. Also wenn eine deutsche Sprachversion noch gewünscht wird, dann liefern wir die sozusagen noch vor Weihnachten nach. Aber now we switch into English, and I'm very, very happy to switch over to Sighet, and there you can see now my dear colleague and one of the guides in the Sighet Memorial, Norbert. Hello, greetings to you to Sighet.
Hello to everybody. My name is Norbert.
I hope you are fine, and
pleased to hear you.
You can hear us.
Here. Honored to be here.
And Norbert, I invited you because you are a guide in the Sighet Memorial, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the Sighet Memorial, and we discussed that you guide us a little bit through this interesting museum. But maybe first of all, what is the Sighet Memorial?
Well, thank you. The Sighet Memorial, its main goal is to keep the civic education and a good knowledge of the country's past, because the Romanian contemporary history was pretty much falsified during the communist dictatorship. So this would be the main aim: education, civic education, and rewrite the recent history.
Okay, and you prepared several materials, and should I start our virtual tour?
We prepared a few videos. The first will be on aerial general footage about the building, and after that we will go into details inside the museum to see the exhibitions, former cells, and so on. Okay, if you can start the first one, please.
Yeah, we are already flying through Sighet now.
Okay, if you can share the screen with me, please. So, dear visitors, if I can call you that, the Civic Academy Foundation was set up in 1993, and with the goal of civic education and the good knowledge of the country's past. The main project is the Memorial to the Victims of Communism, which is formed by the museum in Sighet, and also by the International Center for Studies about Communism, which is located in Bucharest. The memorial was initiated by Ana Blandiana. She's a well-known Romanian poetess, together with Romulus Lusan and a group of historians, architects, designers. In 1993, Ana Blandiana handed over the project of the memorial to the Council of Europe, and after two delegations in which visited the memorial. Oh, sorry.
Anna Blandiana is calling.
And after 2 delegations of experts visited the memorial, the Council of Europe took it under its aegis. And after 4 years, in 1997, the museum opened with the first exhibitions. After only 1 year, the Council of Europe designated the Sighet Memorial as one of the main memorial sites on the continent, among the Auschwitz Memorial and Memorial in Normandy. The prison, the building of the prison is from 1897. It was built in the same style and the function as other prisons from the monarchy and in Transylvania. It was a prison built for common criminals, but it was also used to incarcerate some political prisoners, especially during the First World War. What you see in there, the building is a typical T-shaped building. It also has 2 interior courtyards. First, the one which you see now is a chapel, and the second one, which you already saw, it was a group of statues, the second largest courtyard. In the period between 1948 and 50, students, peasants from Maramuresh resistance were imprisoned here. And after that, in 1915 May, the first batch of the most important political prisoners in Romania arrived here. For 5 years, this prison became a maximum security facility, secretly housing around 200 former ministers, members of parliament, journalists, officers, bishops, and priests from all over Romania. Sadly, 54 of them died, and they were buried in this cemetery, which you are seeing on your screen right now. In unidentified graves, yes, I have to mention that. In 1955, Romania, it is accepted in the, if you can play once again the first video, please. In 1955, Romania is accepted in the United Nations, and from that moment on, this prison loses its political character, and it was once again becoming a normal prison. After 2 decades, the prison was closed down, and the building was only sporadically used as a warehouse. Right, so after the fall of the Ceausescu regime, starting with 1993, Anna Blandiana presented this project to the Council of Europe to prepare the former prison into a museum, and which becomes the first memorial to the victims of communism in the world. Until this date, we had over 1 million visitors, and the former prison today is setting for a museum dedicated to what happened under communism in Romania and in other countries, especially in Central and Eastern Europe. The cells of the prison have been transformed into museum rooms, each with its own theme, chronology, and to show you what this political malformation brought suffering and death through the 20th century. So if you wish, we can switch to the second one. This was just a general area of the museum. So this exhibition, which we see now, is dedicated to the other famous prisons all over Romania. Right now on the screen is the Gelava Prison, which was one of the most important prisons with underground cells, many very harsh living conditions. Most of the cells were underground. Prisoners have to stay in always wet, humid, cold prison cells. Overall, there were more than 2 million political prisoners in Romania, in the People's Republic of Romania. At least 600,000 were arrested and sentenced to prison between 1945 and 89. Right now you can see some letters. In some prisons it was allowed to send home some letters by the prisoners, and they could ask for if you can keep the pause, I can translate. It says, "Dear wife, I'm okay and healthy. This month I have the right to a package of food in around 5 kilograms in weight and 400 Marrakesh cigarettes." It was very, very important for the prisoners to receive food and clothing for the winter times, and also it was a method for the families that they know that they are still alive. The peak of the terror in Romania was between 1948 and 1953 until the deaths of Stalin, and later on once again between 1958 and 60, when numerous labor colonies were set up to receive the overflow from the penitentiaries, because the penitentiaries were not able to house all the prisoners. Also, there were over 200,000 prisoners, people, not prisoners, sorry, who were uprooted, who were deported. Right now on your screen, you can see some personal objects which were donated to the museum by prisoners who survived prison, and they were their personal objects, some ragged clothing, socks, and what they were wearing during the winter times. Around the walls, as I mentioned, we have different important prisons because Sighet was only one out of 42 prisons, and it was only one out of around 200 small crosses which you see on your screen there. The crosses are all marking prisons, labor colonies, executions or mass graves, psychiatric hospitals which were housing opponents of the communist regime all over Romania between 1945 until 1964. In 1964, there was a general amnesty in Romania, and from that moment on, the majority of the prisoners were sent home, but still kept under surveillance. And Sighet prison is right on the extreme northern part. There are two crosses close to the Ukrainian border, which is marking Sighet prison, and also the cemetery of the poor, where the prisoners who died were buried in unidentified graveyards. Sorry. If we go further on, what you see now is a gallery containing more than 9,000 pictures, all with former political prisoners, of course, not only from this prison, also from other prisons, labor colonies from all over Romania. Some of them died, some survived, but they were all innocently imprisoned. And we gathered them apart from the archives, and also a large portion from families. Visitors are coming and can ask us to search for their relatives, and if we don't find them, we can ask the families for for a picture, and we are putting it on indoors. Right now, what you see is a general inside view of the prison with ground floors and 2 floors upstairs. On the right side and left side, there is cells. There were smaller cells at the end, at the first part, and there are smaller cells for one single prisoner, for isolating the prisoners, and then the last two were larger cells, 10, 12 prisoners for each of them. We can switch to, well, first of all, if I talk too much, please stop me, or if you have some questions. Yes, okay, we can. So with an honor to, if you can pause for a second. This is the cell, and at the end, the first second, you can see also in German, you can see the cell where Iuliu Maniu died. He was the most important political prisoners in Romania. He was several times prime minister between the two wars, and also president of the Peasant Party. This is the cell where he died, and we can go inside to see how were the living conditions inside. So what you see, it's just a plain cell. There is a bed. It was filled with straw, and that's about it. Behind the door, there was a bucket for the toilet, the other one with water, and that's about it. It wasn't allowed to any visitors, no visitors, no letters from home. This prison was a special one. Iuliu Maniu was just one of 200 personalities. I have to emphasize this because on the night of 5th of May in 1950, over 100 dignitaries from the whole of Romania were brought into Sighet. They were former ministers, politicians, members of parliament, intellectuals, military officers, and journalists. So they were very well-known, very important political prisoners. Some of them sentenced to heavy punishments, and some of them just held without any form of trial. The majority were over 60 years old. Many important interwar Romania died in custody. As I mentioned, it was the leader of the Peasant Party, and what you see on your screen was the leaders of the National Liberal Party, Ion Brătianu and Gheorghe Brătianu. The Brătianu family was the founder of the Liberal Party in Romania, and 3 of them got imprisoned in Sighet, and 2 of them sadly died here. If you roll, you can see this panel is about the historical Social Democrat Party and his leader, Constantin Titel Petrescu, was also imprisoned here. And this panel, what we see now, are showing us the leaders of the Peasant Party, all the leaders. So this is the public trial. What you see there is the Scânteia was the political party's the Communist Party's main official newspaper that was showing the trial of Iuliu Maniu and the leadership. Over here, we also, in the fall of 1950, after the politicians, or about 45 Catholic bishops and priests were brought to Sighet prison. You can see their faces right now on the screen. Among those who died, among those 45 bishops and priests, 4 bishops sadly died here. And I have to mention that all those who died between 1950 and 55, no death certificates were issued, and the families of the deceased were not notified. I will try to say a few words about the living conditions. Oh, right now what you see, it is elevator used to pull up the food. The kitchen was on the ground floor, and prisoners were up on the second floor and manually pulling the food up to the second floor, or to the first floor and the second floor. So about the living conditions in Sighet prison, the penitentiary was considered as a special work unit. It was known under the secret designation of Danube Colony, but in reality it was mainly just a slow extermination camp for the interwar elite of Romania. And also a very safe place because it was almost impossible to escape. The frontier with the Soviet Russia was around 2 kilometers from here. The prisoners were kept in unwholesome conditions. They were miserably fed. They almost never got any meat, only vegetables, corn, potatoes, rice, soups. They were always kept in cold, in unheated seats. During the day, it was not allowed to lay down in the bed, only to sit on the edge or to stand on foot to walk around. Those who fought back or those who had something to comment about the living conditions, they were punished. We have a footage right later on. You will see about the black cell. I think it's in the next video. Right now we are going down in the basement of the prison, where prisoners were not housed, but they were forced to come down to work every day in underground. And in the next room, there you will see there is this is a vintage photo, a pre-World War I photo. And next room, you will see a manual water pump, which was used by the prisoners had to come down to work to pump water up on the first and the second floor for the others to wash up. It was very, very hard labor. We have some memories written by prisoners who survived the prison. They have to pump it several thousand times. It was very hard for them. They were switching constantly after 5-10 minutes, they were exhausted. They had to manually pump up the water to the upper floors. This is a replica, it's not a whole. What you see here is the black cell used for the punishment of the prisoners. So the prisoners were brought here without clothes, without shoes, and you can see some chains down. The chains were fixed to the floor, and it was fixed to the legs, to the ankles of the prisoners. So they have to be chained so they could not walk around, and they were kept without clothes, without shoes, inside the dark several days. This is the Pauper Cemetery. This is the place where those who did not survive the hard conditions were buried in unmarked graves. After that, so if you have any, can you just pause for a second, please? So this was a general part of the prison, and I tried to explain how the prisoners were living over here. in this prison in the 1950s, 55s. Couple of videos. We made the selections of what we think were some important moments of the communist period, and with different themes about generally what happened in communist Romania. Shall we continue, or there are some questions? So, okay, we continue. So this exhibition is dedicated to the repression of churches, the repression of religion in communist Romania. So the strategy of destroying Romania's Christian churches differed from case to case. The aim was the same. However, before there were differences. For example, the majority religion, the Orthodox Romanian Orthodox Church, was the method was used to decapitate the Orthodox religion, meaning that the leadership was forced to retired, they were demoted, and some of them dying in suspicious circumstances. Others were arrested and put under forced house arrest, mainly in monasteries. Their replacements were chosen based on the criteria of obedience. In regards to ordinary priests, it is estimated that over a period of several years, around 2,000 prisoners, over 2,000 priests were arrested. In 1955, the Securitate, the secret police, cut to around half of the number of the monasteries, and also against the wishes of the patriarch, on the grounds that they were harboring partisans. Some of the monasteries were torn down, and priests were arrested. So that was a strategy used against the Orthodox religion. There were two other Christian religions. One of them was the Greek Catholic religion. It was the second largest national church, with around a million and a half members, and which was just simply banned by the authorities. If you wish, you can replay the same movie. It was just banned officially. Many bishops and priests refused to go to the Orthodox religion, and they were arrested in monasteries, and after, as I told you, in 1950, in the autumn, they were brought into Sighet prison and incarcerated here. You can see right now on the footage, it's 12 Orthodox Greek Catholic bishops, and several of them ended up in prison, and 3 of them died in Sighet. There are some personal objects. Right now, differently, you can see the Roman Catholic Church, which was tolerated during the communist communist period, but not officially recognized. The communist authorities ended all the relationships with the Vatican, saying that the Roman Catholic Church was housing imperialist hotbed, or they had connections with foreign countries, and it was considered imperialist. A lot of the leaders were arrested, and one of the most evocative and special panel is dedicated to Monsignor Vladimir Gica, who was sadly imprisoned and died in Gelava Prison. Oh, in a few words, that was the story of the churches, of the religions. We can go to video 6 if you wish. This is about forced labor colonies in Romania. Right here, what we can see is southeastern Romania. On the right side, there is the Danube. On the left, there is the Danube, and on the right side is the Black Sea. And you could see this white line is the so-called Danube-Black Sea Canal, which was used as manual labor colonies. Right here is a picture showing how prisoners had to work there. These are sketches of some labor colonies, some propaganda pictures. Yes, that's the blue line. They tried to link to shorten the route for the ships between the Black Sea and to the interior of Romania. So it was used around 50,000 political prisoners were working manually, digging the canal. The Gheorghe Dej, who was the leader at the time of the Communist Party, said that this was a graveyard of Romania's bourgeoisie. On this panel right here is labor colonies in mines, underground in the 1950s. Some copper and lead mines, political prisoners were forced to work. Some of them, if you can just pause a minute, I will talk about the motorcycle also. In this region, not far away from here in the 1950s, there were mines, copper mines or iron mines, and political prisoners were brought here. 3 of them were in this part, 40, 50 kilometers from where I sit right now. What we have here is a motorcycle. You can play it now. It is built inside an Aiud prison, which is around the center of Transylvania, and it is assembled by 3 engineers who were imprisoned there, and on the request, on the orders of the warden of the prison, had to assemble it. The engine is a German engine, remnants from the Second World War, but the rest of the body was assembled by these 3 engineers, and it was a working motorcycle.
Norbert, I have a question from Andreas. Maybe I can ask this now. Is it a good moment?
Sure.
Andreas asked, first of all, he thanks for the good and interesting overview, and then he asked were the prisoners forced to take part in communist education? So was there something like re-education or education in the communist way?
They were not in this prison, not in Sighet prison. There were 2 types of the re-education. There were ones in Pitești and Gelava prisons, which was conducted in the period of 1949 to 51 for 2 years, which was made with one of the darkest episodes of the communist regime. There were this re-education by torture and humiliation. It was conducted only in a few prisons with very young prisoners. The communist authorities thought that even though prisoners were already in prison, they could be upholding some information which they didn't mention during their interrogation. And in this through systematic torture and humiliation and hunger and cold, they were trying to get information out of them and also re-educate them to become a new person, new man. This was conducted for around 2 years on very young prisoners. And sadly, it has ended all bad. A few prisoners sadly died during these tortures, and the episode was blamed on the torturers, on the prisoners themselves, and there was a short court sentence, and the prisoners were mainly trialed, and some of them were executed. This was one of the re-education episodes, and there was another in other prisons in the 1960s, which was the prisoners were subjected to read communist propaganda, communist books, and also manifestos, newspapers. They were gathered in common cells, and they had to read to each other communist propaganda. But that was made without violence. If there are questions, or we can go to the next video. Sure. So this is deportation into the Baragan. The Baragan is a place in the southeast of Romania, close to the Black Sea. It also touched a lot of German ethnics. A lot of them were deported from the western part of Transylvania to this eastern part of Romania. It was a deportation inside of the borders of Romania, started in June 1951. Around 44,000 persons, I'm saying persons, not only men, but women, children, whole families who were deported in these Baragan steppes. There were Germans, Serbs, and also other refugees. People were just simply loaded into wagons under military guard, and when they arrived there, they were just thrown out from the train, and they have to fight to care for themselves. Some of them, in the first, they have to build their own houses, as you see, from mud bricks, and cover them with straw. These are pictures from their everyday lives. The majority of the deportees were kept in settlements. They were guarded, the settlements, by police, and they have to go and report every week. So it was not allowed for them to leave the place. Right now is the blacklist is with all those who died in this deportation. The living conditions are very, very hard. And you can see children in deportation, their everyday life, school in deportation, everyday life. Drinking water was a problem. It was a marsh area, so the water had to be imported. They had to buy the drinking water. It wasn't good. On the map, you can see on the left side, this is the place where they were living before, and on the right side where they got deported. You can see there's a German title of the book. A lot of Germans were in some personal objects. On the right hand side, you will see a few more everyday, this is how they were making their own bricks on the walls. This is a funeral in deportation. On the right side, you can see Christmas in deportation. How is a Christmas tree? How the Christmas tree looked like those who were deported. So very, very hard living conditions. And after 1956, after 5 years, they could go home. Some of them, those who went back, had another tragedy in their life because their houses were confiscated. So they could go home, but they didn't have their houses anymore. So they have to go to other family members it was a big drama for over 40,000 of prisoners. Next exhibition is about resistance, about anti-communist resistance in the mountains. These groups were hiding. Just to say a general presentation, as in the background we see the different parts, different groups. These are all partisans who were fighting against the communists on the southern Făgăraș Mountains, on the northern Făgăraș Mountains. The map of Romania, which we saw earlier, there are the places where groups are marked which were fighting against the authorities. I have to mention that the Soviet army was still present in Romania until 1958. So even though the war ended in 45, the Soviets the Soviet army still remained on the territory of Romania. So the majority of the groups organized themselves into a group of partisans in the mountains. The groups were formed average between 10, 30, 40 people. They did not represent a major threat to the communist authority, although as they still remained free, the communists couldn't say that they totally control Romania. They were composed of young people, women, peasants, former army officers, students, workers. They were of all ages, social background, and political orientations. They were armed with pistols, some rifles, but always suffered from an acute shortage of ammunition. They were supported by villagers who brought them food and clothes often. Communist propaganda labeled them as terrorists, and the families and relatives of the fighters were pursued by the Securitate. Some of them who were in prison, some of them who were caught, they were sentenced to long prison terms, had arrested and seized because on the grounds of plotting against the social orders. Majority were killed, those who were sentenced, a lot of death sentences. Those who killed them received rewards and promotions. This is one of the last videos. You know that even though prison inside, life inside the prison walls was very hard, we cannot forget about those who were living outside the prison walls. Life was very hard under the communists. It was always depending on the economical conditions. As in every communist country, the productivity was made not in favor of the inhabitants of Romania, and there was just a general poverty. In the first period of communism, there was a suffocating Stalinist propaganda masked. It was masking the everyday poverty, and after a few relative economic recovery in the first years of the Ceausescu period, after this mild period, also Romania went back into a cultural regression and into a Chinese, North Korean style cult of personality. The periods in this exhibition are illustrated by typical objects, everyday households. They were part of the everyday life of Romanians. Uh, those who did not live behind bars but were allowed the so-called freedom of life, but they were always kept under surveillance, also outside the prison walls. So these were the major exhibitions which I selected. And if you wish, I can show you these are footages from the outside of the museum. The first one is a small chapel. It was, of course, it was built after the museum opens in the memories of the prisoners who died, who suffered across Romania. The label says deaths in prisons and labor colonies. On the left side, you can see names carved in black andesite of those of around 25,000 names, which we managed to gather from the archives. They are all prisoners who died across Romania. And we can slowly walk down to the entrance of the space for prayer and recollection. After the visitors have seen the horrors of the communist repression described in the museum. The chapel was the winner of an architectural competition and tries to resemble an early Christian catacomb. This is the altar inside. Visitors can come and light a candle. And if I think we can show you that on the top side, there is a cross. There is a sunlight can come in during the day, and it reflects on the water, and it reflects on the walls, on the ceiling of the chapel. And the second courtyard, you can still see on the right side in the continuation of the list of those who died. And this is what you see in the second courtyard, and you can see it from the aerial footage from the first video. This is the second courtyard housing the so-called group of statues. The title is the Cortege of the Sacrificial Victims. It's a group of 18 statues by sculptor Aurel Vlad. There are bronze figures moving towards a blank wall. All blank walls symbolize and directed by the headless figure, and which in time this group of statues become one of the symbols of the memorial. A lot of visitors are taking pictures here. And also an outside view of the building of which we visited. So that's about it. That's about what I have selected for the tour. This is also, it's a 4-meter wall, which you see, and on the left corner there is a on the door, it's a gate where the prisoners were brought in, and those who died, who they were brought out from the prison during the night and sent out to the cemetery.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Norbert Konrad.
I hope it was a
that was
or
very interesting.
I hope it not too much info.
No, very, very interesting information about the Sighet Memorial, located in the north of Romania, where we stopped at Sighet, which is quite close to the Ukrainian border, which we are going to pass during the afternoon, because at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, so we will stop our virtual train tour in Czernowitz. So this is not so far away from Sighet, isn't it?
No, not so much.
Thank you very much for the guided tour. Thank you very much for your work there, for civic education, and I think
You're very welcome.
Everybody is welcome to
Also.
visit the Sighet Memorial. Now you are closed, I think, or is it still open during the pandemic?
No, we are open.
You're open.
We are open.
Okay, but just
Yes,
a
and
few
also
people
for
can come in, or
holidays.
yeah.
With some distancing rules, but it is open.
Okay. So stay healthy, and thank you very much.
Yes.
And we're going to meet
care.
again if pandemic is over. Thank you very much, Norbert, to North Romania. Yeah. Okay. Bye bye. So, wir sind nochmal jetzt auch kurz auf Deutsch unterwegs. Wie gesagt, heute Nachmittag um 17 Uhr starten wir unsere Abendsession, eine lange Nacht in und aus Czernowitz. Kommen Sie da dazu? Wir haben das schon in YouTube in der Playlist angelegt. Das wird nochmal eine ganz, ganz ein spannendes Finale. 100 Jahre Geburtstag von Paul Celan, den werden wir dort feiern. Das war ein kurzer Einblick in eben das von Anna Blanjana gegründete Sighet Memorial. Wenn es noch einen Bedarf gibt, dass wir das noch untertiteln sollen, die englische Führung, bitte kurzes Signal an uns, dann würden wir noch eine deutsch untertitelte Version entsprechend zur Verfügung stellen. Jetzt sind wir erstmal raus, wir fahren weiter mit unserem Zug. Es geht jetzt über den Pass einmal durch die Waldkarpaten durch, und wir sehen uns auf der anderen Seite wieder. Wir sehen uns in Czernowitz, wenn wir pünktlich um 17 Uhr dort ankommen. Bis dahin bleiben Sie gesund und demokratisch. Tschüss.